"I can cure you," the Apache girl said to the sick cowboy, her voice cutting through the dawn silence like a blade through canvas. Zeke Thornfield writhed in the dust outside the San Carlos Apache reservation, his skin burning with fever from the desert death plague. 6 Apache warriors surrounded him with rifles drawn, their faces carved from stone in the early light. The debate had been going for 10 minutes. Kill the trespassing cowboy, or let the sickness do it. Ayanna Crowfeather pushed through the circle of men, 19 years old and moving like water through rock. Her uncle Chief Nalnish barked something in Apache that made the warriors step back. Her hands began to glow with an eerie blue light. The sacred healing fire. Nalnish's eyes widened. 3 generations, he whispered in English. 3 generations since the fire showed itself. Zeke's vision blurred. The fever had been cooking his brain for 2 days. He'd stumbled onto reservation land, chasing a fever dream of water. Now, he was seeing an Indian girl with hands that burned like blue stars. "You'll doom us all," Nalnish said to his niece. Ayanna knelt beside Zeke. The blue light pulsed from her palms like a heartbeat. "The spirits don't care about our wars." She placed her glowing hands on Zeke's chest. The world exploded. Both screamed as supernatural energy coursed between them. The blue light erupted outward, washing over the warriors, the sagebrush, the red earth. When it faded, Zeke's plague symptoms were gone. His fever had broken. His breathing came easy. But now he could see the dead. Ghostly Apache ancestors walked among the living. Warriors from decades past stood watching with hollow eyes. An old woman in traditional dress shook her head at Ayanna, with disappointment carved deep in her spectral features. Ayanna collapsed. Blood trickled from her nose. Zeke staggered to his feet, his legs shaking like a newborn colt's. The spirits moved around him like morning mist. One reached out to touch his face with fingers that felt like winter air. "What did you do to me?" Nalnish helped his niece sit up. "The healing fire bonds souls across bloodlines. You are connected now. Forever." The warriors lowered their rifles but kept their distance. One made a sign against evil. Another muttered. "A prayer. If word spreads," Nalnish continued, "every desperate settler will come for Apache healing. They'll chain us like animals, make us cure their sick until we die from the effort." Ayanna wiped blood from her upper lip. "The plague is spreading faster than wildfire. People are dying by the dozens. Not our people, not our problem. The spirits say otherwise." Zeke's head cleared enough to remember the last 2 weeks. His cattle drive had been decimated by the desert death, strong men reduced to fevered skeletons in days. The sickness followed no pattern. It struck ranches and towns without warning. Doctors were baffled. Medicine men were silent. "This plague," he said. "It's not natural." Ayanna looked at him with surprise. "You can feel it too now." "The wrongness." The ghostly Apache woman stepped closer to Zeke. She pointed toward the railroad tracks visible in the distance. Her mouth moved without sound, but somehow he understood. Disturbed graves, broken sacred ground, vengeful spirits unleashed by iron rails and dynamite. "The railroad construction," Zeke said. "They tore up burial sites." Nalnish's expression hardened. "You know nothing of our ways. I know desecration when I see it." 2 weeks earlier, Zeke had been a different man. Former Union cavalry officer, turned cattle driver, haunted by Civil War memories and seeking redemption in the Arizona Territory. He'd led a herd of 200 head toward the railroad depot at Copper Falls. Simple work, honest pay. A chance to start fresh. Then the desert death had found his crew. It started with Jake Morrison, his best rider. Fever and chills that turned to delirium. Within 3 days, Jake was dead. Then it took Tommy Chun, the Chinese cook who'd never been sick a day in his life. Then Pedro Vasquez, tough as leather and twice as stubborn. One by one, Zeke's men fell. The cattle scattered. The sickness chased him across the desert like a living thing with teeth. He'd stumbled onto reservation land half dead, seeing visions of water that wasn't there. The Apache could have killed him, should have killed him. Instead, this girl had saved his life and doomed them both. Ayanna struggled to stand. The healing had drained her like a punctured water barrel. "We have to leave before the Indian agent comes looking." "You cannot leave," Nalmish said. "You broke sacred law. Used forbidden's medicine. The tribal council will demand answers." "Then give them answers. Tell them the old ways are dying anyway. Tell them the white world is coming whether we fight it or not." She'd been taught the healing arts in secret by her grandmother, an old woman who remembered when the Apache controlled vast territories instead of living on government reservations. The healing fire was forbidden because it made bonds that transcended tribal boundaries. It was dangerous magic. Unpredictable magic. Magic that could enslave her people if the wrong people learned about it. "I won't be a prisoner," Ayanna said. "Not to the whites, not to my own people." Zeke felt something stir in his chest. Not attraction, something deeper, like recognition. "I'll protect you. From what? You don't even know what you are now." "What am I?" "Bound to me, connected. We share the same life force now." The ghostly Apache woman nodded and faded away like smoke. The other spirits began to disperse as the sun climbed higher. But they didn't disappear entirely. They lingered at the edges of Zeke's vision like heat mirages. Nalmish looked at both of them with something between pity and fear. "You have until dawn tomorrow. After that, I cannot protect you from the tribal council. And if they find us? Exile or death." Ayanna touched Zeke's arm. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, not painful, but intense. Like touching lightning. They could feel each other's heartbeat. Each other's fear. "We leave now," she said. They gathered supplies quickly. Ayanna packed traditional medicines and her grandmother's healing tools. Zeke had only his horse, his gun, and the clothes on his back. The warriors watched them prepare, but didn't interfere. As they rode away from the reservation, the desert stretched before them like an ocean of red sand and broken dreams. The sun climbed toward its noon fury. Behind them, the Apache settlement grew smaller until it vanished entirely. "Where do we go?" Zeke asked. "Copper Falls. The plague is worse there. If we're going to find answers about what's causing it, that's where we start." Zeke felt her determination through their supernatural bond. It burned in his chest like swallowed fire. But underneath it, he sensed something else. Fear. Not for herself, but for what she might become. A weapon. A tool. A miracle to be bought and sold. The healing fire had saved his life, but it might have condemned hers. As they rode deeper into the desert, the weight of that truth settled between them like dust on everything else in this broken land. The desert swallowed them whole. Two riders against an endless expanse of red earth and silence. Zeke's horse picked its way through the scattered rocks while Ayanna rode beside him on a paintmar that moved like shadow over stone. They'd been traveling for 6 hours. The supernatural bond between them hummed like a taut wire. Every few minutes, Zeke caught flashes of her memories. Apache children playing by a stream that no longer existed. Soldiers burning wickiups. Her grandmother's hands teaching her which plants could heal and which could kill. Ayanna felt his memories too, battlefield smoke and the screams of dying men. The weight of decisions that sent boys to their graves. The hollow ache of survival when better men had fallen. She was weakening. Each mile drained something vital from her core. The healing fire had burned too bright, too fast. It was consuming her like green wood in a furnace. "We need to rest," Zeke said. "Copper Falls is only another hour." "You're bleeding again." She touched her nose. Her fingers came away red. The healing bond was a parasite feeding on her life. Force, every beat of her heart pushed her closer to the edge. They found shade beneath a cluster of juniper trees. Ayanna slid from her horse and sat heavily on a flat rock. The desert heat pressed down on them like a physical weight. "Why did you save me?" Zeke asked. "The spirits told me to." "That's not an answer." She studied his face. Weathered skin. And eyes that had seen too much. A man carrying his own ghosts. "My grandmother said the healing fire would choose its own time, its own purpose. I didn't know what that meant until I saw you dying. Maybe the spirits were wrong." "The spirits are never wrong. Only we are." Copper Falls sat in a valley between two mesas, a collection of adobe buildings and false front stores that had sprung up around the railroad depot. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, but the streets were nearly empty. The desert death had turned a thriving town into a tomb. They rode down Main Street past shuttered businesses and boarded windows. A handwritten sign nailed to the post office door read, "Doc Henderson dead. No medicine available." The smell of sickness hung in the air, sweet and cloying. The smell of hope rotting in the desert sun. "There," Ayanna pointed to a large tent set up behind the church. "That's where they're keeping the sick ones." A man in a black frock coat stood outside the tent, addressing a small crowd of desperate families. Dr. Cornelius Ashford, traveling medicine show proprietor and seller of miracles. His voice carried across the empty street. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have just returned from the great medical colleges of Philadelphia with the most advanced treatments known to science." Zeke snorted. "Snake oil and false promises. People need hope. They need real medicine." Dr. Ashford spotted them approaching. His eyes fixed on Ayanna with the hungry look of a man who'd found unexpected treasure. He'd been selling colored water and sugar pills while families watched their loved ones die. Now he sensed opportunity. "Miss, you look like a person of healing knowledge." Ayanna said nothing. "I could use an assistant. Someone with natural wisdom to help these poor suffering souls." The crowd turned toward them, desperate faces streaked with tears and dust. A woman clutched a fevered child to her chest. An old man supported his wife as she swayed on unsteady legs. "Please," the woman with the child whispered. "My boy is dying." Ayanna looked at Zeke. The bond between them carried her internal struggle. Save the child and reveal her power, or watch him die to protect herself. She dismounted and approached the woman. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old. His skin burned with fever. His breathing came in shallow gasps. Ayanna placed her hand on the boy's forehead. The healing fire flickered beneath her palm, barely visible. Weak as a candle flame in wind, the child's fever broke instantly. His breathing deepened. Color returned to his cheeks. The crowd gasped. Dr. Ashford's eyes widened with greed. Ayanna staggered. Blood flowed freely from her nose now. The healing fire was consuming her faster with each use. Zeke caught her before she fell. "That's enough. There are others." "You're dying." More people emerged from houses and shops. Word spread through the town like wildfire. The Apache girl could cure the desert death. She could bring back the dying. "Miracle worker," someone shouted. "Indian magic," another voice called out. Dr. Ashford stepped closer. "My dear girl, you have a remarkable gift. I could help you. Develop it properly, teach you modern medical techniques." "She doesn't need your help," Zeke said. "Everyone needs help, cowboy. Especially when federal authorities start asking questions about unauthorized healing practices on reservation runaways." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Dr. Ashford knew exactly what leverage he possessed. A woman approached from behind the church. Isabella Santos, Mexican Apache with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. She'd been documenting everything, recording the plague's patterns in a leather journal she carried everywhere. "You're wasting time with false cures." she said to Dr. Ashford. The sickness isn't natural. Nonsense. It's clearly a form of consumption brought on by poor sanitation. Then explain why it follows the railroad construction so precisely. Isabella opened her journal and showed them a hand-drawn map. Red X marks indicated every plague outbreak across the territory. The pattern was unmistakable. The sickness followed the rail line exactly, jumping from town to town as the tracks advanced. Every outbreak corresponds to disturbed burial sites. Isabella continued. The railroad crews have been digging through sacred Apache grounds for months. Zeke studied the map. You think the plague is supernatural? I think the plague is revenge. Ayanna nodded weakly. The spirits of the disturbed dead. They won't rest until the desecration is answered. Dr. Ashford laughed. Primitive superstition. Ladies and gentlemen, don't listen to these wild theories. What you need is modern medicine. But the crowd was already dispersing. Fear had replaced hope in their eyes. If the plague was supernatural, then earthly medicine couldn't stop it. We need proof, Isabella said. Documentation that the federal authorities can't ignore. What kind of proof? Zeke asked. The source. The original burial site where the railroad first broke sacred ground. That evening, they made camp outside town. Ayanna was too weak to travel further. The healing fire had nearly burned itself. Out trying to save one child. Using it again might kill her. Isabella shared her supplies and her knowledge. She'd been tracking the plague for weeks, interviewing survivors, and mapping its spread. Her conclusion was inescapable. The desert death wasn't a disease, it was a curse. My grandmother was Apache, Isabella explained. She told stories about what happens when sacred places are violated. The dead don't stay buried. How do we stop it? Zeke asked. Return what was taken. Honor what was broken. Make peace with the angry spirits. Ayanna stirred from her fevered sleep. The bond with Zeke let her feel his thoughts. His growing understanding of the Apache way of seeing the world. His acceptance that some things couldn't be solved with bullets or brute force. There's something else, Isabella said quietly. I've been tracking supply shipments from the railroad camps. Someone's been selling artifacts from the burial sites. Pottery, weapons, ceremonial items. Shipping them back east to private collectors. Who? Indian agent Silas Blackwood. He's been systematically looting every sacred site the railroad uncovers. The pieces fell into place. Blackwood wasn't just allowing the desecration. He was profiting from it. Every artifact sold strengthened the curse. Every sacred object shipped east fed power to the vengeful spirits. Riders approached their camp. Federal badges glinted in the firelight. Blackwood had found them. Miss Crowfeather. Blackwood called out as he dismounted. You're in violation of reservation boundaries. As an enrolled member of the San Carlos Apache tribe, you're required to return immediately. She's not going anywhere, Zeke said. Mr. Thornfield, isn't it? Former cavalry officer. I know all about your war record, your discharge papers. Your debts. Blackwood had done his research. He held all the cards. The young lady has certain abilities that could benefit the territory's medical crisis. Rather than face charges for unlawful flight, she could contribute to the greater good under federal supervision. The trap was closing. Blackwood intended to use Ayanna's healing power for his own purposes. Force her to cure wealthy clients while people like the fevered child died in the streets. I need time to consider, Ayanna said weakly. You have until morning. After Blackwood and his men rode away, the three of them sat in silence around their dying fire. The desert night pressed down on them with the weight of impossible choices. He'll never let you go, Zeke said. I know. We run. Tonight, head for Mexico. Running won't stop the plague. Isabella closed her journal. There's another way. We find the source. The original burial site. Confront whatever's causing this. Directly. That could kill her, Zeke said. Staying here definitely will. Ayanna looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky. Somewhere in that darkness, Apache spirits wandered between worlds, seeking justice for their desecrated graves. The healing fire inside her was their gift and their curse. She was the bridge between the living and the dead. By morning, Blackwood would return with more men. There would be no escape then, no choices left except surrender or death. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Change was coming to the territory. The old ways and the new ways were about to collide with the force of summer lightning. Ayanna made her decision. They would find the source, face the angry spirits directly, make peace with the dead or join them. The healing fire flickered one more time in her chest, weak but still burning. Still fighting, still hoping for redemption in this broken land. Dawn never came. Blackwood's men surrounded their camp while stars still burned overhead. Federal badges caught the firelight as boots crunched on gravel. Miss Crowfeather, time's up. Ayanna sat by the dying embers, too weak to run. The healing fire had reduced her to skin and bone. Each breath was a struggle against the growing darkness in her chest. Blackwood dismounted with the confidence of a man who held all the cards. You'll come with us, quietly. She's dying, Zeke said. Then we'd better put her abilities to good use while we can. 2 soldiers flanked Ayanna and lifted her to her feet. She moved like a ghost, barely substantial enough to cast a shadow. The supernatural bond with Zeke carried her pain directly into his ribs. Isabella stepped forward. She needs medical attention. She'd get it. After she earns it. They loaded Ayanna into a wagon and headed back toward Copper Falls. Zeke rode alongside, his hands tied to his saddle horn. Isabella followed at a distance, her journal pressed against her chest. The makeshift medical camp had tripled in size. Overnight, word of Ayanna's healing power had spread across the territory. Desperate families arrived by wagon and horseback, carrying fevered children and dying elders. But Blackwood's real clients waited in a separate tent. Wealthy ranchers and territorial officials who could pay premium prices for miracle cures. Men who'd never waited in line for anything in their lives. You'll start with these gentlemen, Blackwood told Ayanna. They've made generous contributions to the Territorial Medical Fund. The first client was Judge Morrison, a fat man with soft hands and harder eyes. The desert death had barely touched him, but fear had driven him to seek preemptive healing. I hear you can cure anything, girl. Ayanna looked at Zeke through the tent flap. Their bond carried silent communication. She was trapped, but not powerless. Not yet. She placed her hands on Judge Morrison's chest. The healing fire flickered weakly, but it was enough. The judge's minor symptoms vanished instantly. Ayanna collapsed. Blood streamed from her nose and ears. Excellent work, Blackwood said. Next patient. Through the afternoon, Blackwood paraded wealthy clients past Ayanna's failing body. Each healing drained more of her life force. Each use of the sacred fire brought her closer to the edge. Zeke watched helplessly from his guard post. The bond between them let him feel her dying by degrees, her heartbeat growing weaker, her breathing more labored. Meanwhile, truly sick people waited outside in the desert sun. Families who couldn't afford Blackwood's fees. Children burning with fever while rich men bought insurance against imaginary threats. Isabella circulated through the crowd, documenting everything in her journal. Names, faces, testimonies. Evidence of Blackwood's exploitation. Late in the afternoon, she made her move. Isabella approached the soldier guarding Zeke. Water for the prisoner? The guard nodded. While he watched her pour from the canteen, Isabella slipped a knife into Zeke's bound hands. Tonight, she whispered, when they change the watch. The rescue came at midnight. Zeke cut his bonds and slipped into the medical tent. Ayanna lay on a cot, barely breathing. The healing fire had nearly consumed her entirely. "Can you ride?" "Have to." Isabella waited with horses at the edge of camp. They lifted Ayanna into the saddle and rode hard toward the mountains. Behind them, shouts erupted as the guards discovered the escape. "Where are we going?" Zeke asked. "The source," Isabella said. "The original burial site." They rode through the night toward the railway construction camps. The desert death was spreading faster now, jumping from town to town without pattern or logic. Entire settlements stood empty. Tumbleweeds rolled down main streets where children had played days before. At dawn they reached the rail line. Fresh tracks stretched across the desert, supported by ties cut from sacred trees. The construction crews had carved through 3 Apache burial grounds, scattering ancient bones across the desert floor. Isabella consulted her map. There, Devil's Canyon. That's where it started. The canyon was a wound in the earth, carved by flash floods and dynamite. Railroad ties and scattered bones littered the bottom. The air hummed with wrongness. Ghostly figures moved among the debris. Apache spirits, their faces twisted with rage and sorrow. They'd been guarding these graves for generations. Now they wandered homeless between worlds. "The spirits are trapped," Ayanna said weakly. "They can't rest while their bones are scattered. What do they want?" "Gathering, proper burial, respect." A new sound echoed across the desert. Hoofbeats and jangling spurs. Blackwood had found them. "Miss Crowfeather," his voice carried down into the canyon. "You're making this much harder than necessary." Behind Blackwood rode a full cavalry unit. Colonel Marcus Wade, military commander of the territorial district. His orders were simple: contain the Indian magic threat by any means necessary. "Surrender now and face relocation," Wade called out. "Resist and face the consequences." The trap was closing. Ayanna was dying. The spirits grew more agitated as soldiers surrounded the canyon rim. That's when Isabella revealed her truth. "I've been documenting everything," she said to Blackwood. "Your artifact sales, your exploitation of sacred sites, your profiteering from the plague. Documentation means nothing without authority to act on it. It does when that authority comes from Washington." Isabella produced a telegram from her jacket. Official federal seal. Authorization to investigate territorial corruption. "You're under arrest, Agent Blackwood." But Blackwood laughed. "Colonel Wade answers to me in matters of Indian affairs." Another revelation. The corruption ran deeper than anyone suspected. Military and civilian authority working together to exploit Apache suffering. "There's more," Isabella continued. "I know about the artifacts. The real reason you've been shipping sacred objects east. Enlighten me." "Each artifact sold strengthens the curse. You're not just profiting from the plague. You're feeding it." The truth hit Zeke like a physical blow. Blackwood wasn't trying to stop the desert death. He was making it worse. Every sacred object removed from Apache territory gave more power to the vengeful spirits. "Brilliant, isn't it?" Blackwood said. "Create the problem, then profit from the solution." Ayanna struggled to stand. The healing fire flickered one more time in her chest. She looked at the scattered bones, the angry spirits, the soldiers preparing to end the standoff with blood. "There's another way," she whispered. "What way?" "The old law. The price of healing." Zeke understood through their bond. The healing fire didn't just cure sickness. It could also make peace with the dead. But the cost would be everything they had left. "It'll kill you. I'm dying anyway." Isabella looked up at the canyon rim. More soldiers were arriving. Soon there would be too many to fight or flee. "What do you need?" "Help me gather the bones. Give the spirits what they want." They worked frantically, collecting scattered remains while Blackwood's forces surrounded them. Apache bones mixed with railroad debris. Ancient pottery shards trampled into the mud. The spirits grew calmer as their remains were gathered. Their rage softened into grief. Their desire for vengeance transformed into longing for rest. "Now what?" Zeke asked. "Now we choose." Ayanna explained the final secret. The healing fire could bridge any gap, heal any wound. But healing the rift between worlds required a sacrifice. Someone had to stay behind to guard the boundary. "I'll do it," Zeke said. "We'll do it together," the third option. The one Chief Nalnish had warned them about. Both could sacrifice part of their identity to create something new. A bridge between Apache and white worlds. A healing that honored both traditions, but it had never been attempted. The risk was complete destruction. "It's the only way to stop the plague permanently," Ayanna said. "And if it doesn't work, then we die trying." Above them, Colonel Wade was losing patience. His orders were clear. Contain the Indian magic threat. Use force if necessary. "Final warning," he called down. "Surrender or face military action." Ayanna looked at Zeke. Their bond carried more than supernatural connection now. It carried trust, partnership, love forged in the crucible of impossible circumstances. Together? Together. They knelt among the gathered bones and began the ritual. The healing fire blazed between their joined hands. Not blue now, but white hot. Pure energy that burned away everything except truth. The spirits gathered around them. Generations of Apache ancestors, their faces peaceful for the first time since their graves were disturbed. Above Blackwood. Screened orders, Colonel Wade prepared his men for assault. But the ritual was already beginning. The healing fire spread outward, touching every scattered bone, every angry spirit, every wound carved into the sacred earth. What happened next would either save the territory or destroy it. The fire burned brighter. The spirits began to fade. And somewhere in the growing light, Ayanna and Zeke prepared to discover what lay beyond the boundary between worlds. The healing. Fire blazed white between their joined hands. Ayanna and Zeke knelt among the scattered Apache bones while the world held its breath. Above them, Colonel Wade's soldiers prepared to storm the canyon. The third option. The untried path. Both would sacrifice part of their identity to forge something entirely new. "Are you ready?" Ayanna whispered. Zeke nodded. Through their bond, he felt her terror and determination burning with equal intensity. They were about to attempt something that could destroy them both. The fire erupted. White light consumed the canyon, washing over bones and railroad debris alike. The Apache spirits gathered closer, their faces peaceful for the first time since their graves were disturbed. Ancient voices whispered in languages older than memory. Zeke felt his memories of the white world beginning to fade. Cavalry charges and cattle drives dissolving like salt in water. But in their place came new understanding. Apache words flowing through his mind. Traditional ceremonies he'd never learned, but somehow knew. Ayanna experienced the reverse transformation. Her tribal identity remained, but expanded to include Zeke's world, his battlefield brotherhood, his code of protecting the innocent, his belief that honor could bridge any divide. The healing fire transformed from weapon to bridge. Instead of consuming them, it wove their souls together in a pattern neither Apache nor white, but something unprecedented. A new kind of healing that honored both traditions while transcending their limitations. The light spread beyond the canyon walls. Across the territory, every person afflicted with the desert death felt the change. The supernatural plague simply ended. Fever broke instantly. Breathing cleared. The vengeful spirits found peace and faded into whatever lay beyond the living world. But more than sickness was healed. In Copper Falls, white families and Apache refugees began speaking to each other for the first time. In ranch houses and pueblos, old enemies discovered common ground. The healing fire had touched more than bodies. It had touched hearts. "Colonel." Wade lowered his rifle. Below in the canyon, something impossible was happening. The Apache girl and the cowboy weren't destroying each other. They were creating something new. Isabella documented everything in her journal. The moment two worlds chose cooperation over conquest. The birth of a healing practice that drew strength from difference instead of fearing it. Agent Blackwood made one final desperate move. He drew his sidearm and aimed at Ayanna. If he couldn't control the healing power, he'd destroy it. The shot echoed across the canyon. But the bullet passed harmlessly through the healing fire's radiance. Blackwood's corruption couldn't touch what Ayanna and Zeke had created. His influence crumbled like desert sand in wind. The ritual reached its crescendo. Every scattered Apache bone in the canyon rose into the air, suspended by the healing fire's power. The spirits of the disturbed dead gathered there. Remains with reverent hands, ancient pottery reformed, sacred objects made whole. Then, with dignity restored, the spirits departed for their final rest. The fire dimmed. Ayanna and Zeke remained kneeling among the now empty graves, forever changed by what they'd experienced. Their supernatural bond had evolved into something deeper: partnership, understanding, love forged in the crucible of impossible choice. "What are we now?" Zeke asked. "Something new." Isabella climbed down into the canyon. Her journal contained proof of everything. Blackwood's corruption, the plague's supernatural origin, the moment healing triumphed over exploitation. Colonel Wade followed, his military bearing softened by what he'd witnessed. "Miss Santos, I believe we need to discuss territorial policy." "Changes, I believe we do." The aftermath unfolded slowly. Agent Blackwood faced federal charges for corruption and grave robbing. His network of artifact smuggling collapsed. Sacred Apache objects began returning from Eastern collectors, restored to their rightful resting places. Colonel Wade's military district became the first to implement integrated settlement policies. Apache knowledge of desert survival combined with settler farming techniques. Traditional healing practices worked alongside territorial medicine. Dr. Ashford left the territory, his snake oil remedies replaced by genuine healing cooperation between cultures. The railway construction continued, but with Apache guides ensuring no more sacred sites were disturbed. Progress without desecration. Development with respect. 6 months later, the settlement that grew around Devil's Canyon bore a new name: Crow Feather. A community where Apache, Mexican, freed slave, and white families worked side by side. Ayanna established a healing practice that drew students from across the territory. She taught traditional plant medicine to settler children, while learning modern techniques from traveling doctors. The sacred and scientific merged into something stronger than either alone. Zeke became the settlement's mediator, fluent now in both Apache and English ways of seeing the world. His battlefield experience served new purposes, protecting the community from those who still preferred the old divisions. Isabella's documentation became the foundation for new territorial policies. Her journal traveled to Washington, where lawmakers saw proof that cooperation could succeed where conquest had failed. The healing fire no longer burned visibly in Ayanna's hands, but its influence spread through every person touched by the new community. Understanding passed from family to family. Respect grew where fear had once festered. On quiet evenings, Ayanna and Zeke would ride to the original burial site. The graves were properly marked now, with stones carved in both Apache and English. Wildflowers grew where scattered bones had once lay. The desert wind carried no more angry spirits, only the whisper of sage and the promise of rain. "Do you ever regret it?" Ayanna asked one sunset. "Giving up your old life?" Zeke considered the question. His memories of the white world remained, but changed, tempered by Apache wisdom, enriched by understanding he'd never possessed before their bond. I didn't give it up, I expanded it. And I expanded mine. They watched the sun paint the mountains red and gold. Around them, the settlement bustled with evening activities. Apache children played with settler kids. Mexican vaqueros shared techniques with freed slave cowboys. Cultures blending without losing their distinct flavors. The healing fire had shown them the truth. Division was a choice, so was unity. In the distance, a new family approached the settlement. Refugees from some distant tragedy, seeking the safety and acceptance Crow Feather had become famous for providing. Ayana and Zeke rode down to welcome them. There was always room for more healing in this desert place where two worlds had chosen to become one. The stars emerged as full darkness settled. Somewhere in their light, Apache ancestors watched over the living with approval. The sacred fire had found its true purpose at last. Not as a weapon or tool of exploitation, but as a bridge between hearts that had forgotten how to trust. The desert held its peace. The healing continued. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.